All you mama bears out there, Nicole here with Cub Dream It, and I wanted to just pop in today. I've got a few minutes before the kids get out from school and get home, and I really wanted to just give like a very abridged background as to our journey from the very beginning with Cohen, my cub, to where we're at today with making the discovery as to what the underlying issue is with him and why he was having such a hard time learning and processing letters and decoding. And so it kind of started for us way back when Cohen was in his first year of preschool. I had noticed that he was in comparison to his peers, very far behind in his alphabet. And it was something that we worked on at home. I used to have little banners around his play area with letters, and we kind of used the SMAT process or method, the SMAT. Instead of going directly through the alphabet from A to Z, the SMAT process focuses on the most frequently used letters in the alphabet and goes through them that way. And so I had actually had a conversation or a meeting with his preschool teacher about my concerns, and she was like, no, you know, yeah, he's not picking it up necessarily the same way his peers are, but sorry, my dog is squeaking his toy. But, you know, rest assured, like, he's 4 years old and it will come to him, and all children learn at their own pace, and boys especially have a harder time picking up letters. And so I felt good after our conversation. And then his second year of preschool came around, and then I noticed some of his friends were actually reading small words and very small sentences, all of it, you know, CVC words, which are the consonant vowel consonant words like cat or dog or sat or sit, had, all those short vowel 3-letter words. And he was still not even fully grasping his alphabet. So I was concerned when he was going to start kindergarten that he still had a hard time with much of the alphabet. And so that summer I worked really, really hard with him, and he got into kindergarten and there was an improvement. It took a little while, but eventually he learned the alphabet. And again though, while his peers started moving ahead and progressing when it came to reading, my little cub he hung back. And I couldn't figure out why. And so I asked his teacher again toward the end of the year, based on his test scores, I could identify, okay, we are definitely behind. He's not, you know, at benchmark or where he should be. And again, I was assured, everybody learns at their own pace. He will be okay. Things will click. Just have him read more. Make sure he reads 20 minutes every night. And he might just have to try a little bit harder in the classroom. And so I just rolled with that because they were the professional. This is what they had their training and education in and all their experience. And I wasn't familiar with anything in this world. So first grade came. First grade was a tumultuous year for us altogether. My son is in a Chinese immersion program. We had really a very difficult time with his Chinese teacher. She was, for lack of a better word, awful. And she would talk to my son like he was stupid. She would punish him for things he didn't understand what he was doing wrong. And so he would stay in for recess or get sent to a corner. And he didn't know what was going on. And my cub, we call him a gentle giant. He's a big kid for his age. You know, he's tall. He's very solid. He's not fat by any means, or chubby even. But he's a brick. But he's so gentle-hearted, so sweet and kind and generous. And he's a giver and a lover. So at the beginning, well, probably the first part of second term, with him in first grade, I had to address some issues that he was having with his teacher, with the principal, and she had to intervene on some level and take care of some stuff. And then come the end of second term, early third term, it got really bad. I had a friend who came to a meeting with me with this teacher in regards to the kids, and she was floored with the way she would talk to me, the way she would address Cohen, the things she would say about Cohen. And this whole time I had been thinking I was maybe overreacting and I just need to chill. I didn't want to be that helicopter parent. And when my friend had acknowledged and validated what I was feeling, that was my final straw. And I had contacted the principal immediately after that, and I said, something has to be done. He either changes classes or I withdraw him from the program altogether. And the Chinese program, to kind of give a little bit of background about it, it's a grant program. And when a child starts they have their spot in the program starting in kindergarten, and they move through the program as they get older. But if you were to withdraw from that spot, usually that spot just remains vacant because it's too difficult to have a student move, you know, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, any of those grades, from a school not having gone through the Chinese program and then just starting them in the program without the kind of foundation starting at the very beginning. So usually when a kid withdraws from the program, that spot remains empty, and that affects their grant money. So the principal responded very quickly, really well. We moved him to a different Chinese class, and which was still really hard because we were year-round, and he changed tracks. So he was no longer on the same track with any of his peers or friends, and it was like starting over for him. So so that was, you know, the first upheaval of the year. Meanwhile, he's still struggling with his reading in English, and his English teacher in first grade that he got moved to halfway through the year, she was wonderful and had acknowledged, yeah, Cohen needs some extra support. So she brought in the school's reading coach, and the reading coach sat down with me and said, you know, we need to work on some of the fundamentals at home. And then I was kind of accused of, you know, she had said something along the lines of, you know, he must have just missed a week where, you know, they were learning these really important things. And that wasn't the case. I'm not that parent who pulls their kids from school for things. So anyway, I was a little irritated, and I was like, okay, you know, just dismiss it, let it go. And so then we started working at home more aggressively on CBC word concepts and the Zeno words, which are the most commonly used words in the English language. There's like 107 Zeno words. So we started doing that. And again, you know, he was told, just keep reading. Make sure he reads every night. Read more, read more, read more. And this is when homework started getting out of hand. And he was doing homework up to an hour and a half every night. And finally, I just was like, this is too much. Like, he's a first grader. He was 6 at the time. I'm like, this is not okay. And I'm stepping in and I'm saying, we need to do something about this. So they cut back on his homework load at home, and we were encouraged to still work on the CBC concept. Eventually, we upgraded and moved into the CBC Silent E word structure, and he had a harder time with that. And so first grade ended, we started second grade, and I decided to be preemptive. I went to his English teacher before school, or, you know, right before classes started, and I had said, this is where Cohen is. He's below benchmark. What can we do? You know, he's going to need some extra attention. And she was like, okay, well, it's going to take me a few weeks to kind of figure out like what level he's at, and his strengths and weaknesses. And I understood that. And I didn't really hear from her. And I should have followed up. Like, looking back, I should have followed up. And so conferences came early second term, you know, from first term, and his numbers were so low. And she gave me the number and the name of a woman who had a program in the area that would work with reading remediation. And she had suggested that this be our next route. She said that she was intervening every week with him. She did one-on-one work. Her aide did work with him, and then he participated in small group support outside of the classroom, and nothing was really working. You know, at this point, they were using a lot more vowel combinations. So like the whole, when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking kind of concept. Again, we were told he just needs to read more. He needs to read more. You know, he needs to try a little bit harder. And this is when I was starting to get really frustrated, because I was like, we read all the time. What do you mean he needs to read more? Like, this isn't working. Something, you know, 1 and 1 here are not adding up to equal 2. There's something going on in the process. And so I took up his teacher on her suggestion, and I went to this woman. She did some testing of him and had said, yeah, this is where we're going to need to start. He's a really great candidate for our program. Of course, this is outside of the school. It's not something that's supported financially. So this became a financial responsibility for my husband and I. But it was a priority, and we were like, we have to make this work. And it wasn't long after he started the program when the primary teacher reached out to me and said, I can't do any kind of clinical diagnosis, but Cohen meets the bullet points for dyslexia. And this was actually the second time that word had come up. And at the end of his first grade year, I attended a meeting for parents. It was a free meeting offered in our district, our school district, for parents with struggling readers. And so I dropped everything to make sure I could make it to this meeting. I went, and that was actually the first time that dyslexia was ever mentioned. And I remember sitting in the audience, and the lecturer, she was talking about, you know, does your child do this, and does your child do that, and do they mix this up? And I just remember thinking, yes, this is him to a T. And then she said dyslexia, and I was like thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that's not what this is. You know, and this kind of goes back to my limited understanding of what dyslexia really was. And I got all teary-eyed sitting in that audience. Sorry. When this word was first introduced, because I knew that this wasn't something that would be cured, and it would be something he would struggle with for the rest of his life. And so in the back of my head, I kind of put it back there, and I was in a little bit of denial. And then, you know, the director of this reading center had suggested it again. And I was like, okay, I need to be brave. And if this is really the case, I need to meet it head on. So then I went to the school, our administration, and I had said, this is what I suspect. What can we do? Can we have him tested? And the vice principal said, yes, we're going to do this kind of test. You need to sign it. This is to approve us to do it. And so I did, and it came back, and they said, you know, he is, I don't even have the verbiage in front of me right now, but basically, and I'm paraphrasing, he's significantly below benchmark, but we feel that additional classroom support would be sufficient at this time to help bring him up to grade level. And I was mad about it because we had been doing this very thing that they had suggested, you know, additional support in the classroom, and it wasn't working. And then they told me I need to contact his doctor, his pediatrician, because this is a disability. This would be a disability. So I contacted their office, and they said, no, this is actually an academic issue. You're going to have to take this back to the school. And so I literally was being passed back and forth between both of them, the school and the doctor's office. And I was frustrated. So then I decided I was going to step in and take a little bit more control. So I got on the computer and I started researching like crazy. And I was looking at my insurance, and I found a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, a psychologist. And she got amazing ratings. It was an alternative behavior strategy, is actually what it was called in Salt Lake City. And I called to see if I could get in, if they were taking new patients. And they said, they called me back and said, I'm sorry, you know, this doctor is booked out so many months. And I remember crying. I started crying on the phone with the lady who had called. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. But I need some support because I don't feel like I'm getting it from the school. And so she was like, okay, I'm going to send a note over to the doctor and, or over to the psychologist, and I'll see what I can do, what information I can give you to support you in the meantime before we can get you in. And I was like, okay, that would be great. And a few hours later that night, well after business hours, I got a call from the psychologist herself, and I was shocked and so thoroughly impressed that this woman would take time after her business hours to call me, and I wasn't even technically, or you know, a patient, or my child wasn't a patient. And she had said, you know, I can do this testing, but this is how far out I am, and that's about 5 months. And she goes, however, the school is legally obligated to do this testing as well if you request it in writing. And then I was like, gosh, why wouldn't my school have let me know that in the first place? So she told me what to ask for. I typed up a letter. I went to the school's vice principal. I sat down with her, and she said, okay, well, we got to do this. So she gave me a document, and it had all this stuff that I either had to accept or decline for testing. And it was all very technical in nature, and I wasn't experienced in this. I didn't know what I was looking for. And so she kind of paraphrased what everything meant, and I selected and declined on these tests or these evaluations based on her recommendation. And it took a few weeks for the school to do the testing. I got the results back, and they rejected or declined the IEP at that time. And I was devastated because his test scores were so low. Like on his DIBELS testing, he was testing at like in the 40th or 40, in like around 40% of benchmark. So 60% lower than that standard level. And I was so frustrated because I was like, how can you look at these scores and not see that he needs support? And I took the test scores to the psychologist. She got me in on the schedule much sooner than anticipated because I was on the cancellation list. And I brought in the test scores. I put together a binder. It's probably really overzealously thorough. It starts, you know, kindergarten is in the back, and I keep adding, you know, to the new years, but I have test scores, I have evaluations, I have things that I approved, things that I declined. Any document I ever got from the school, I have sample work from the classroom. I have all of his term scores and grades. Everything is in there, and it's all in chronological order. It's all highlighted. I mean, yeah. So I brought this binder in, and I showed her the test results, and she grossly disagreed with the results of the assessment. And she looked at the same data that our school psychologist, the resource department, the LEA, which was at that time that we were working with, it was the vice principal. And she was like, there are red flags all over this. But they declined or rejected the proposal for the IEP based on his IQ. And as I had said in my previous vlog, dyslexia is not a reflection of a poor IQ. In fact, they tend to excel in a lot of other categories. So because he excelled in so many areas and was so low in like his processing, it kind of evened out. And so he was just above normal, you know, which is 100. I think he came in at like 117 was the overall median IQ level. And the doctor was like, or the psychologist was like, no, like this is not a sound form of evaluation in the areas where he needs help. And so I went back to the school, and they were like, sorry, this is our response. This is our rejection. And he no longer qualifies for more testing for 365 days. And that's when I learned that I had, based on the assessment or the recommendation of the vice principal, I declined the very evaluations and tests that he needed. And I was pissed. I was so mad. So we had to get through second grade. His teacher was amazing and tried to make as many accommodations as possible. And then we continued to use the psychologist, which was also very expensive. So now I was paying, you know, all this for this program for him to be a part of twice a week after school. And then I was paying out of pocket for the psychologist, because I learned then that insurance doesn't cover dyslexia, as I also mentioned in my previous vlog, because it's classified as a learning disability, not a physical or mental disability. So everything was coming out of pocket. And without having the official testing by the psychologist, he couldn't get a clinical diagnosis. But that testing, we were looking at several $1,000s. And I couldn't swing it. And so I started third grade. I emailed his teacher like 2 weeks in advance before school. She wanted to meet before classes started, and things got all hectic and crazy because she was taking in all these new students and parents and all this stuff. So we met one-on-one, and she was wonderful. Like she was prepared for that meeting. She had consulted with his teacher from second grade, what worked, what didn't work, the strategies that she used in second grade, how could we translate that and move it into third grade. Well into first term, his teacher came back and said he needs more support than what I can give him in the classroom, that he needs an IEP. And so she started advocating to the school administration, who, for the record, had the authority to do that testing or repeat the testing or complete the testing that had been declined in the first place within that 365 days. But they could, and they refused to do it. And I was just so mad because I'm like, you're going to make me wait all these extra months where he could be getting help and progressing. You're going to make me wait on a technicality. Like, you're a school and a teacher. Like, your job is to want to help these kids be successful academically. Like, why would you not give this child the opportunity to succeed in the classroom? And I got to wrap this up. My kids are going to be home soon. But, so I went out there and I did more research. I left no stone unturned. I did everything I possibly could. And eventually I found an exam or an evaluation that I had not rejected. That was specifically, was for reading. And if he failed that evaluation, it would qualify him for an IEP. And so I went to the school and I requested it in writing. It was something that they legally had to do. I got a lot of, well, where did you learn about this? And I was just like, it doesn't matter. Like, I learned about it, and legally you have to test, so please do that. And I told my son, I was like, it's okay to bomb this. Which is like the first and only time I will ever say that in his life. But I needed him to do as poorly as possible so that he could get the help that he needed. And it was so irritating because it was like they wanted him to completely fail before they would intervene. And I was trying to prevent that failure. And I was trying to intervene as early as possible. And so anyway, so he took this exam. It was called the Gray Oral Reading Test. And he failed. I got an email a few weeks later from the resource department, and it said that he qualified for an IEP, and I lost it. I cried so hard in relief because I had been fighting the system and out there learning as much as I possibly could. I even read through the district's policies and procedures handbook. I had to Google like every other sentence because I had no idea what it meant. And so that's how we eventually got to the point where he qualified for his IEP. So with that said, I'm going to sign off here today. Maybe in a couple days I can give you more details on where things have gone now for us in his journey since we've gotten that IEP in place. But that's just a little bit of background on our story and how we got to where we are. So stay tuned for episode 3, and like I said, I'll kind of pick up where this part of my story ends. Everybody have a great Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in.